Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us in this webinar. No signal, no problem, how RACO keeps critical infrastructure online with satellite. My name is Brandon Satcham. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product and Experience at Blues. And if you are not familiar with Blues, we are a device to cloud connectivity platform. We help our customers take their disconnected things and get those things securely, safely, and reliably connected using hardware and services that we provide. I am really excited to be joined today by one of our customers and one of our partners to talk about how we're bridging the gap from cellular to satellite connectivity. So I'm joined today by Eric Newman from RACO and Kartik Ranjan from Skylo. And I'll let these guys introduce themselves before we continue. So Eric, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Happy to join you all today. I'm the president and CEO of RACO Manufacturing and Engineering. We're actually a 78-year-old company based here in the Bay Area, and we've been making remote monitoring solutions for a wide variety of industrial customers, but mostly in the water and wastewater industry during that time. So really happy to talk today about our experience with Blues and some of the reasons why we selected the solutions that they provide as we develop a next generation product here that's hopefully launching in the next few weeks.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Eric. And hey, Kartik.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brandon, for having me here. Nice to meet all of you. My name is Kartik Ranjan. I lead our partnerships team for IoT specifically at Skylo. Skylo is the world's largest standards-based D2D operator. We operate a network in over 38 countries, covering 72 million square miles of coverage. And we've been collaborating very closely with both Blues and RACO to enable their device to have connectivity anywhere there is no terrestrial network. So excited to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you both. So Eric, I know you mentioned RACO has been in remote monitoring for a long time, since 1948. So what do you all do today and what kinds of critical infrastructure does RACO help monitor?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I often joke that we've been doing IoT since before the internet. And a lot of it came out with very local alarms and annunciations. The primary application way back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was actually in agriculture. And so we were
Mhm.
monitoring temperatures for frost in vineyards and orchards and crops. Um, More specifically, since kind of the mid 80s, we've really kind of developed a niche within water and wastewater specifically. And so today, our products are monitoring sewage lift stations, um, clean water pump stations, and all of the assets that are associated with those sites. Those sites are typically what we call outside the fence. So within, say, a wastewater utility, you have the treatment plant where everything is collected and treated and the water is cleaned. But then you have thousands of assets typically outside the fence. So those are things where you don't have an everyday operations team going around and monitoring and checking the status of those things. And oftentimes those assets are also a mix of public and private assets. Depending on the state, depending on the municipality, there might be private ownership of these lift stations, or there might be public ownership of the lift stations on private property. So there's a really kind of wide mix of end users and customers who would buy our products, but they're monitoring things like that. That includes pumps, electrical control panels, various sensors on site, looking at either the levels, the pressures, the temperatures, and backup generators, power sources, all sorts of kind of different things. But one of the things about our products is that we really pride ourselves on being agnostic to the process or the environmental condition that you want to monitor. So we don't make specific sensors. That's a pretty competitive market where we don't differentiate, but we allow people to pull in all sorts of different sensors and get a clean view of their operations using our devices.
So in a lot of those cases, like wastewater, energy infrastructure, things like that, there can be cases where your customers are deploying in relatively remote areas or even in areas where
Sure.
maybe connectivity is not always a guarantee
Yeah,
across primary radio access technology. So what does the challenge look like for your customers in those sorts of deployments?
sure. Um, Yeah, I mean, as kind of hard as it is to believe, there are still places in the country that don't have cellular service. Um, and typically, those sites will be, well, historically, they've been either RF radio has been kind of, setting up your own RF radio network and towers and infrastructure in order to get the data out of the site. Or in some cases, they use traditional copper POTS landlines.
Hmm.
And so as we've looked to develop our next generation product, obviously technology has really kind of advanced substantially in the last decade. And so um, when we were thinking about what to develop and what the actual kind of communications would be, we really wanted to make sure that reliability was at the forefront. I mean, ultimately, like our products are not something that customers use every single day, but they
Hmm.
must be reliable because if there is a sewage spill or there's a condition that will lead to a sewage spill, for example, that costs that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if that sewage hits the ground for all sorts of regulatory reasons. So reliability is really critical. And so for us, as we were thinking about, it's not just about the 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 normal connectivity. It's also about connectivity in extreme conditions when we can really show that we're the most reliable solution versus our competitors. And so
Hmm.
satellite uh, really solves both of those problems. So even in the most remote um, site that has absolutely no connectivity, we can connect. But the other really interesting thing about having satellite comms on our devices is that um, both the wire line and the cellular infrastructure is actually still pretty vulnerable. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of customers down in like the southeast, so they're subject to hurricanes, right?
Hmm.
As reliable as copper pots landlines are, um, a hurricane comes through, it can knock over some telephone poles. It can knock over some cell towers, right? So there's all sorts of issues that happen. And one of the things I like to say to customers now that we have this satellite option is, you know, climate change has not gotten to the point where hurricanes are knocking satellites out of low Earth orbit. And so hopefully we don't have to worry about that in the
Yeah.
in the near future. But the satellite comms really kind of differentiates us against our competitors because it is that much more reliable in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the copper POTS networks, and I read a case study that we did with you all recently just about the reality of the POTS infrastructure going
Mm-hmm.
away. In a lot of cases, were you all, for cases where you needed to sort of modernize that deployment for some of your customers, and cellular alone wasn't going to cut it, did you have a solution before looked
No,
at satellite, or was it just we've got to stay on POTS until we have a better way
yeah,
to solve
yeah,
this?
we had to
Yeah.
stay on pots. I mean, that was the
Yeah.
reality of it. And the
Yeah.
wastewater sector is not the most bleeding edge type of thing. It's very conservative. The safety is obviously a very big issue, and a lot of the operators are very familiar with those legacy products, and so that's what they're
Yeah.
comfortable with. They know that they need to move, and the end is coming for those.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
actually some really important legislation going through the FCC right now related to the regulations around decommissioning those lines. And if
Right.
that goes through, it'll be much easier for the carriers to decommission those lines. And so, the end is coming.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that our customers are in a position to be ready for that. But having satellite also allows us to solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably a good segue for me to ask you a couple of questions, Kartik, because I think that I would love to hear more. I mean, we've been working with you guys at Skylo for the last couple of years now, and I'd love to hear more, and for folks listening to hear more about sort of the history of Skylo, how you all got into this area to begin with, and kind of what makes Skylo unique, and what are the things that your customers love about you all?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with actually a point that Eric made in that it is very true that cellular networks only cover 15% of the globe. So we see
Hmm.
these bad swaths of land, especially in remote areas where you have wastewater treatment plants, where you have pump stations, where you maybe have energy infrastructure. All of these areas have critical infrastructure that absolutely needs some kind of connectivity. And as Eric rightly pointed out, the majority of this industry for the longest time has relied on POTS or other types of solutions. Of course, there
Hmm.
are legacy satellite networks, but the challenge that they have is that, given the proprietary nature, they haven't been really in the cellular ecosystem. And that's very, very important because as you have a migration from POTS into cellular, that's obviously one step. But what are you going to do in areas without cellular coverage? And how
Hmm.
easily and quickly in a scalable solution can you build that's also cost effective to be able to replace that, right? Like Eric pointed out, there's a reluctance, one, to adopt new technology, but when they adopt new technology, you want that to be very seamless and simple. And that's really where Skylo comes in, is that, we don't have this notion of proprietary hardware like a proprietary module or a gateway that you have to install. We are a first class citizen in the 3GPP community. And just to give a little bit of history, the 3GPP is the standards body that governs cellular communications worldwide. And they introduced a few years ago something called D2D, which is direct to device. And
Hmm.
what that enabled is that standard cellular devices can now not only talk to terrestrial networks, but can also talk directly to satellite links. So this is game changing for the entire industry. What that means is everything from the smartphone in your pocket to the watch on your wrist to the vehicle that you get in and drive to the pump monitoring stations that Eric's company is building. All of those can now communicate seamlessly with both satellite terrestrial networks as well as satellite networks. And Skylo is the first 3GPP compliant D2D service provider that's out there today. We
Hmm.
cover over 72 million square kilometers around the globe. We have service in 38 countries, North America, Canada, US, Brazil, most of Europe, Australia, New Zealand. And so we have, with this network, we have connected well over 15 million devices onto our network. And we're able to provide a variety of services, right? If it's your smartphone, you're doing things like SOS. We have a number of case studies where hikers have gotten injured up in the mountains, had no way to get a message out, and used the Skylo network to be able to call for emergency services. We have users similarly who were in the ocean, all they had their watch, and they were in the water, they needed help. They were able to initiate an SOS. You have casual users who are able to send SMS messages. And for IoT, RACO is a great example, right? You have critical infrastructure that needs to be monitored for where you need to get messages out for reasons of predictive maintenance or location or just checking in and ensuring that systems are online. You have assets that need to be tracked, and you need visibility into where those assets are at any time. So there is an enormous interest, and the interesting thing is, Brandon, is that a lot of customers don't realize that it's not as difficult as it seems, right? With a product like
Right.
Blues and being able to have the same SIM, they're able to make a connection into a satellite network. Skylo is an operator very much like an AT&T or a Verizon. We have a core 3GPP compliant core network. We have Earth stations and we have partners who provide the actual satellites, but we operate that network end to end. And the other point to note is that we integrate with MNOs and MVNOs. And so the data traffic provisioning data plans all come through our operator partners. And that
Hmm.
simplifies things a lot because now you have, and in the case of Blues, it's a one-stop shop where you get both the component hardware you need as well as the service from one provider. And that really simplifies, Brendan, being able to build, deploy, and use Skylo's network.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you mentioned this a couple of times, but being a standards-based D2D network has benefits your customers a great deal. Can you, I mean, you're kind of hinting at this already a little bit, and you talked about the benefits that that provides, but just so it's clear to folks listening, I mean, what do customers really get from the fact that Skylo took a very standards-based approach as opposed to creating another proprietary satellite-based network?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me give you a very simple an analogy. Let's say you're in the United States and you have a Verizon phone, and then you're going over to France. When you land in France, there's no Verizon network, obviously. So what 3GPP enabled through carrier interconnect is the fact that your phone now says, okay, there's no Verizon network. I'm going to do a scan. Oh, there's an Orange network here, and it automatically authenticates as long as you have roaming or whatever on your phone, and you're now getting connectivity. You're getting bars, you're receiving phone calls, you're able to send SMS. Skylo works in exactly the same way. When you take that same device and there is no terrestrial network, the device will then scan, if it has the capability, scan for satellite networks. It will see Skylo. Skylo, through our interconnect with the carriers, and we have over 25 different partnerships with everybody from Verizon, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Telefonica, and others. That interconnect works exactly the same as it does on terrestrial. The device scans for satellite networks, it sees Skylo, and then you do a challenge authentication response with the core network, and boom, you are able to connect to Skylo and you are able to send messages. That is incredibly, it seems very simple, and we've worked very hard to make sure that that experience is a reality. But that's really what the real benefit is that customers don't need to know the intricacies of how a satellite
Mhm.
network works. It works just like it does in cellular and gives you the ability to connect when there is no terrestrial network.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that analogy. That's very powerful. I'm thinking back to the times earlier in my career when I first started traveling to Europe and I would land in Europe and the first thing I had to do was go buy another SIM if I wanted to get anything, on my handset. And now it's just a matter of like I land, I get the message from AT&T that, hey, you're on international now, but everything's good. The handover has taken place. And that standards-based approach is really powerful. And we've seen this, when we first started working with you all. And last year we launched the Starnote for Skylo as a separate module that matches really well with any of our existing node cards. But just last month, we now have a single module that actually has cellular, satellite, and Wi-Fi in that single package. And that's just not possible, I think, without a standards-based approach to be able to have a singular module that can communicate over both cellular and NTN satellite, provided the support that you guys have. So it's really, really great to be able to do that. So Eric, for you, I'd love to hear about why, what led RACO to choose Blues as your solution for starting with cellular to begin with, but then adding in satellite with Blues and Skylo as a part of that Verbatim 2 product as well.
Yeah, I think for us, it was so we already have a cellular product in the market, and we use a competing aggregator. Um,
Hmm.
I think for us, it really came down, frankly, to the fact that the cellular and the satellite were integrated, and the dev tools that Blues had provided to simplify a lot of that, right? One of our hardware engineers, I remember he was the way he characterized it to me when we were considering Blues. He's like, "Hey, look, you know, if you use the analogy that we want to have the best restaurant in the world, um, he's like, with Blues, we could just start by working on the recipe and the food we're going to be serving instead of going out and trying to like build the tables and build the chairs and throw the clay to make the plates and
Hmm.
forge the silverware." And so that was a really appealing thing for us, was kind of so much of that scaffolding and staging had been already created by Blues. And I think that that's a real value that you bring to the market, the simplicity, and you know making it so simple that, no offense to software engineers who might be on the call, but a software engineer could implement these things as opposed to needing all of this kind of specialized hardware skills that would be required if we just went out and sourced a modem and sourced, a satellite modem and things of that nature. So the integration of it, but then also the fact that you had the cellular and the satellite, and that those could be kind of coordinated in a way that fit what we were looking to achieve with that reliability that I referred to before. I mean, those were big differentiators for us. And it also helped that my former My former boss, when I started my career, was an executive at Blues at the time. So we got I got the inside look at what you guys were doing. So that was also very helpful. But
That
I think we
helps.
would have
Yeah.
picked it anyways.
Oh, that's great to hear. And so then how's the integration process been from when you all started looking at Blues and started working with the note card and Starnote for Skylo and all of that? Like, how's that been for you guys?
I mean, it's been great. I mean, I don't have a lot to compare it to, because we're not building like another product with another vendor. But I would say that the support that Blues has provided all along the way has been really helpful and instrumental in getting us going. And then now that we're in kind of final functional testing, it's that support has been really world class, and we've very much appreciated that. So that's something that's been really great. Collaborating with Skylo. I mean, I know that we're working on some antenna certifications and things of that nature. So it's been a very collaborative effort in a way that I think your traditional hardware vendor doesn't really care to do. So that's definitely a way that Blues is differentiated in the market. There's actually good ongoing support for these things, not just some documentation that they, um, you know, that they that they point you to when you have a problem, and that's been very helpful for us.
Well, that's great to hear. And you mentioned the antenna certification. I did want to bring that up and throw this one over to Karthik because I think that's been a great example of where as a partner of Blues and and working with RACO as well, I think Skylo has done a great job of engaging with RACO. We typically you'll see this in a lot of cases. The module that we provide in our retail store comes with an antenna that's designed to get our customers started, but it's not uncommon for a customer, depending on their deployment, to find a case where they need to pursue a different antenna. And so, Karthik, can you talk a little bit about what the process has been like working with RACO and making sure that they've got the right antenna solution for their product once live?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I want to point out is that with Skylo, you don't come to Skylo to buy a service plan. We don't have pricing or quote that. That our business model is primarily through the MNOs and MVNOs. However, you do come to Skylo for certification, and I think this is the point that Brandon is raising here, which is that typically customers may choose to do a module up design, right? You buy a module, you design your PCB, you choose an antenna, and in that case, you do come to Skylo certification, and that involves going through our process, which involves going through our compliance matrix, the field testing, the third-party labs for CTI, AOTA, and regulatory. And certainly customers can choose to do that. They get a custom design. It just takes a little bit longer. With the Blues solution, as Brandon was saying, it comes with an embedded modem that's on an M.2 interface with an antenna. And if you take that whole kit and put it in your design, you don't have to Skylo certify at all. In fact, you can come to us afterward, and we can just check your design as indeed using the Blues modem and antenna, and then we can have you listed as a certified device, really with doing very little work. However, in some cases and some use cases, they do vary. Sometimes an internal antenna is okay. Sometimes you need an external antenna. Sometimes, the applications for where you're going to deploy and where you're going to be able to get a good signal vary by use case to use case. And that's where, in the case of RACO, they looked at the standard Blues antenna and said, yeah, this isn't quite going to fit our use case. We'd still like to use the Blues embedded modem, but we need a different antenna. And we were able to work with RACO to simplify that process dramatically. Rather than go through the whole Skylo certification, we basically worked out a way that they could run some basic lab tests using the new antenna that they have and be able to get certified on Skylo. The main thing Skylo is concerned about is, of course, the transmission power so that it meets within the specifications of our satellite partners. And so that's what the purpose of those lab tests are, but it's drastically simplified and certainly helps reduce time to market for partners like RACO.
Awesome. So Eric, now that you all have been going down this path, and as you said, you're imminent, at having this product out there, I'm sure you've been having conversations with a lot of customers, and you've even mentioned that. So how has this option for cellular and satellite together changed the conversations you're having? Is it opening up new markets? Is it sort of greasing the skids on some of those customers away from the copper pot systems? What's that been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think in those conversations, we're typically met with surprise.
Hmm.
Um, I think that most folks are very comfortable with cellular networks. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. They get how that all works, but satellites still feel kind of futuristic and, kind of abstract to people. But then when you kind of lay it out to them as, hey, when the cellular network goes down, we're going to be able to shoot something up into space and kind of get your data back to you. Uh, People are thrilled. Again, they want that reliability. They want the ability to get an alarm, to get a data log, to get a reading off of a device, even in the most extreme circumstances. And so, we're bundling it together in our standard product as a standard feature, and that differentiates us in the market. It furthers our brand promise of reliability. But frankly, it's just one of those things that people are a little bit floored that we even have satellite connectivity and that we would bundle it in like the normal off-the-shelf product. Because
Hmm.
I think historically you've had situations like Karthik mentioned where, satellite is this kind of unique, everybody's got their own proprietary standard. There's all sorts of integration work. There's all this complexity that comes with it. And we're just saying, no, 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 plug the device in the wall. And it'll work. And folks aren't used to that. And that's something that I think both Skylo and Blues together have been able to provide us, which we're then using to differentiate ourselves in the market.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned satellite and the surprise that you're getting. I think part of the way that I see that is that customers tend to assume that satellite is going to be expensive, that it's going to be
Mhm.
very, and obviously the cost model for satellite is different than cellular in a lot of cases. That's a reality. You're counting bytes as opposed to maybe counting megabytes over
Sure.
satellite and cellular. But even still, I think one of the things that we've partnered with Skylo on, and we're pretty proud of this, is this idea that whereas with a lot of maybe traditional networks, you're paying for a slot on the network and a monthly fee with some commitment, minimum commitment. But we wanted to have a product for our customers that allowed you to, much like we did with cellular when we first launched Blues, that you had some bundled data, and that gave
Mhm.
you as a vendor, as someone that's building a product, the ability to pass that on to your customers as well, where they're not paying a monthly fee and you're only paying for the data that you send over the network. So how has that landed with customers? It sounds like that's part of what's enabled you all to bundle that, to even have that conversation with them to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, the kind of pay as you go type of thing, or having it be included into what we would otherwise have as their cellular plan. I mean, we bundle everything all together for our customers, so they're not paying kind of
Hmm.
separate fees for cellular data usage or anything like that. We tend to kind of take a pooled approach across our fleet, and then you get some kind of bad offenders or high usage
Yeah.
devices, but then that's why we have our customer success team. They'll reach out and they'll work with them. Hey, what's going on? What's the configuration here? I mean, I would take that question in two ways. Number one is, how do our customers see it? And I think again, they're kind of floored. Um, but also like how do we at RACO see it? And I can tell you, like if there was um big implementation fees or access fees that we had to pay, like we probably wouldn't use the
Mm.
service, right? Because we don't have satellite customers. So one of the things that you're doing here is you're solving that adoption problem, right? You're reducing a barrier to adopt a proven technology by taking an innovative approach to it. And I think that's why we're using it. Again, if we had to pay, thousands and thousands of dollars just for the chance or just to have that as kind of a selling point on our literature, I would probably question that. But the fact that it's pay
Hmm.
as you go, um, is makes it very appealing, right? And we adopt it, and then we kind of we will see how much our customers use it, right? But
Right.
but now it's available and it can be adopted, versus
Right.
the kind of prohibitive barriers with these kind of license fees and kind of network access fees that you're referring to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the audience questions that came in beforehand was about sort of total cost of ownership, Eric. And one thing that I would love to hear is, as you've been looking at helping customers navigate away from copper pot systems, how are you all presenting, or what's been the reception of sort of that TCO calculation when it comes to looking at your new system relative to what they've had from you in the past?
Yeah, our main challenge with that is that historically, when we would sell a device that would connect to the copper pots network, RACO would not collect any residual
Mm.
revenue. So we wouldn't,
Mhm.
we had no ARR associated with it. Um, and with our cellular product, we do, and that the cellular product integrates with our web app, and you can go configure the unit from there, and all. So there's all sorts of benefits. Um, and people do kind of gripe about moving from a POTS device to a cellular device that has annual subscriptions associated with it. Now, I don't want to be like a legacy landline carrier, but I don't know how they've tricked people into thinking that that's not a subscription, right? And
Yeah,
so
sure. Right, right.
we are, it's a very easy thing to say to them, which is the challenge becomes, sometimes those budgets reside in different areas. And so
Hmm.
our buyer might not be used to the subscription, but the IT department or, within a municipality, another group might actually be paying the phone bill. So we just simply ask them, well, what are you paying per month for your copper pots access,
Hmm.
right? And oftentimes it's over $100. And so we're charging $525 a year. And so, you know, once you start to compare apples to apples, the total cost of ownership really kind of goes out the window, especially because the legacy carriers are also, they're trying to make it a pain for people to continue to use these. And so I
Right.
think they've been very steadily increasing the prices on them. So, whenever we're doing a proposal and that comes up, I'll call the carrier in the local area and get a quote for a business landline, right? And it's not uncommon for it to be over $100 a month. So
Wow.
when you do
Yeah.
TCO and a TCO analysis comparing apples to apples, we come out pretty rosy in that comparison.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, Karthik, I had another question for you. You mentioned earlier that Skylo has coverage in, I think you said 68 countries was the number you used.
38.
38, sorry. There's a couple of questions that came in specifically about does Skylo work in the US? Yes, we know that it does, but could you give like an answer on sort of the regions that you all have pretty good coverage today so that folks have an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have coverage in four continents today, soon to be five, but starting in North America, we have coverage in Canada and the United States. I will share as we use geostationary satellites, the signal does sort of attenuate as you get closer to the pole. So in like the
Hmm.
northern reaches of Canada, it may attenuate. I can share we did a field test at around the 60th parallel, and we were able to get one phone being able to SMS to another phone. So it
Okay.
does
Yeah.
work. And the good part is, in that part of Canada, you don't have a lot of trees either, so there's nothing
Yeah,
really
good.
blocking your view. Going down south, we have coverage in Brazil, in South America, and we're certainly working on some other countries down there. We also do offer offshore coverage, at least 20 miles, but typically the beam does go out after that. We do have on our website a link to geographical coverage, and you can actually see all the countries there. So I would encourage the audience, go take a look there, and you can have a much more precise picture of where we have coverage. But moving on, we also do have coverage in Europe. So almost all of Western Europe, again, even going into Scandinavia and part of Lapland in the north. We also cover fully the Baltic Sea. We cover the Mediterranean Sea. And then moving on, we cover Australia and New Zealand as well, and the water area around those regions. So we're constantly adding coverage, I'll share. So definitely keep an eye on our map. We keep that updated, and we're excited to have a rapid expansion into other markets.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we had another question that came in that I will field. It was a question about sort of the cost between cellular connectivity and satellite. As I mentioned earlier, obviously, when you're dealing with cellular, you're typically counting your cost in megabytes versus tend to look at bytes and be very byte constrained on satellite. One of the things that we do at Blues in order to accommodate for that is that we have built all of our APIs to make it very simple for firmware engineers, for product builders to, when the device is connectivity aware, just select the data that you send. And so we have a couple of different approaches that we tend to use, but we compress all the data that we send over satellite, and we provide a number of convenience APIs that help engineers decide when I'm syncing over satellite, only send the most essential information, only the most essential telemetry, as opposed to maybe when I'm connected over cellular or even Wi-Fi, I'm sending everything that I'm getting for my devices. So there's actually a lot of convenience things in there because we recognize that whether it's RACO or whether it's another customer that's building with satellite, that you are using that as a failover. Most of our customers are using it as a failover. And so what they want to be able to do is have very tight control over sending what matters most when sort of the primary link has gone down, whether it's Wi-Fi to cellular, cellular to satellite, et cetera. So feel free to go to blues.com or the Blues developer site to check out the APIs on that. But it's actually one of the things that we believe makes it easier to build these sort of multi-rat solutions today. So as we wrap up here, Eric, I would love to. You mentioned at the beginning today that you've been doing IoT before it was called IoT, which I love that. So I'd love to hear over the next 12 to 18 months what's on the horizon for RACO. How does satellite play in that roadmap for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, the major thing for us is getting this next generation product launched. So, it's been a couple of years. Most of our product lines are pretty mature in terms of their life
Mhm.
cycle, and so we've never used satellite before. This is the first time we'll be deploying it, and in the next 12 to 18 months, right? It's about getting that launch out there, right? Getting through whatever little hiccups there might be. Um, you know, the dual kind of antenna is a little bit of a challenge. People are a little bit they're they don't know exactly how that might work or how they might apply that.
Mhm.
So just really, it's about the implementation and the execution of the launch now. Like
Mhm.
I said, we're in kind of the final phases of functional testing, and that we're hoping in the next couple of weeks we're going to be going live with our first production units, getting out to customers. So there's the known unknown that we have. Like once we kind of throw this out there in the wild and people start using it and asking questions, we know that we're going to get a lot of feedback on it. But right now, it's just about that execution and the launch.
Great. Well, good luck with that. And obviously, you know that we at Blues and Skylo will be there to continue to support you guys and help make that successful for sure. So,
Of course.
Kartik, what can we look forward to from Skylo? I know you guys are, as you mentioned earlier, continuing to look at additional country coverage and support and things like that. But where should people be watching what's happening with Skylo?
Yeah, so I think definitely, I think the market's looking forward to see the node card for Skylo come out and be in production, available on the market very, very soon. I will share that we're constantly growing the number of chipsets and modules that we support. So definitely having more choices available, more options available depending upon what kind of terrestrial networks you want. Some of these modules are coming out with some other terrestrial. So it's really that combo that you have between terrestrial networks that are NTN capable to have as a backup. The other thing is we're continuing to grow the number of operators that we work with as we go into new countries. It's not just about having coverage, but what are the operators that we will work with within those countries? And I think I want to reemphasize a point that Eric made. The beauty is, and the reason why just coming out of Mobile World Congress, we heard a lot of operators say Skylo really is a partner because they extend our network. And the beauty of
Mm.
the extension of the network, coming back to the business model, is that you can design your product in today with Node Card for Skylo, and you may not use Skylo, right? But when you need to, it's there for you and you can pay for it as you need it. And that's really the thing to look for from Skylo is that the ability to have it as a true backup solution or something that you can go and expand your market with today without significant cost. There's no subscription, there's no monthly commitment that you have to make. It is a true backup and you pay when you need it.
Absolutely. And you guys, have really helped make it possible for Blues and for our customers to be able to rely on satellite, to like truly treat it as a first-class citizen in IoT use cases, which has been a tough thing for the last several years. And so we have really enjoyed the partnership. We love what it's enabled RACO to do and other customers as well. So it's a good time to be really considering satellite as an option in your product stack for IoT. So I will wrap it there. Thank you both very much, Eric and Karthik, for joining today. Thanks to everybody for joining. Feel free to this session will be recorded, so you'll get a follow-up with additional information from us later. But definitely thanks for taking the time, and everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for everyone.
Thank you.